It's Monday morning, motivation and finance. I love that combination, and there is no better person to handle such a combination than Sharif Gbadamosi, a learning and development professional with over 20 years experience in senior management and executive roles in the manufacturing and service industry in Nigeria and the UK. So much about him, currently founder and principal consultant of JP Consult. And of course, we're looking at borrowing and the cash flow trap. Wow. When last did I borrow? Let me start. Because whenever you're talking, I tend to always put myself into the situation. And that's the way I can learn the best from you, right? Borrowing and the cash flow trap. Do you have to borrow? Does one have to borrow? No. You don't have to borrow.
We don't have to borrow, but sometimes we're put in the corner. And it's very, very difficult for us not to borrow.
Okay.
But there are circumstances under which it's best for people to borrow. Borrow under the circumstance that you know whatever it is that you're borrowing for, it's going to yield some kind of returns for you. But if you're borrowing outrightly for an expense, it's suicide. Always. It's always suicide. It's just not feasible for anybody to actually do that.
To borrow for an expense.
To borrow for an expense. Well, most people do it. They borrow. Then again, one of the ways in which they can borrow for an expense is when you know that you're expecting a mega income in the future that can actually cover the expense. But then again, see, all income is not guaranteed. Even income from work, you know, because things happen. We don't know what the future holds.
If it does not enter,
If it hasn't entered, it hasn't entered. And realistically, from a money perspective, I always advise people, never spend money that you're expecting.
And we tend to do that a lot.
You know, because as I say all the time, hope is not a strategy. Hoping that this money comes, it's not a strategy.
A number of people would not be excited with what you just said now.
It's the reality.
But it is fact.
It is fact.
Hard fact. Hope is not a strategy. You know, now when you're talking about that cash flow trap, I know it has to do with what you're expecting, right? Yeah. And you just mentioned now that, of course, it is not, you cannot spend expected money.
Yeah.
How does one who has been in such a scenario, one who has not yet been, how do you escape such a trap?
If you're already in debt, you have to have a systematic plan of getting out of that debt. Now, it's not something that, you know, most people, okay, I'll give you an example. If your income is the minimum wage, 30,000, and maybe for some reason you weren't able to meet up all your expenses, you borrow 10,000 this month, what you're inadvertently doing is telling yourself that next month your income is 20,000 because you have to pay back the lump sum, right? So, and you do that, you're already short. Your 30,000 always, imagine you weren't able to make any savings out of that 30,000. So already you're down 20,000 plus whatever surplus you always go over every month. And you have to pay that other person back. So one of the big problems also with borrowing is that it has a potential to lose you relationships.
You know, just before you move on, just keep that thought there. Yeah. Not everybody pays back. That's another problem.
Not everybody pays back,
so you said something like you have to pay. Now, that's honor and that's compulsion. Because of you borrow, there's a compulsion to pay back. Yeah. You know, but not everybody gets to do this. We'll talk, that's another topic, you know. That's another topic here. But then, like you said, let's take it that everybody has sense and they're doing what they're supposed to do. You are supposed to pay back. So let's move on that.
So let's assume you're paying back. So if you're paying back that lump sum, you already have 20,000. And your 30,000 is what you normally spend every month. You're short in the coming month. What you've just done is mortgage your future by saying, okay, you know what, I borrowed this 10,000. Because normally when we borrow, we're always feeling confident. We feel confident that we can pay back. Money's coming, you know, I'm at least going to get a salary. But it's somewhere in the back of your mind, you're telling yourself, this 20,000 that I'm going to be left with after I pay back this debt, somehow I have to live with it. And we always tell ourselves, I'll drink Gary or I'll sit back and I'll do. But it's never that easy. It's never ever that easy because we don't know what the future holds. What you can do, for instance, is if you borrow money from someone, you can say, okay, rather than pay you the whole 10,000 back, if I can set off 2,000 every month for the next 5 months to pay that. But that still leaves you with 28,000 naira as opposed to 30,000 naira still. So you're down 2,000 naira. But sometimes some people can manage with that. It's not always the easiest thing. But the best thing is just not to borrow at all. Because if you look back at the things you actually spend the money on, you can't really make any account of it. Most people, it doesn't seem worth it in a lot of cases.
Very true. But, you know, some people might now say it gets to the point where they are borrowing for basic necessities. So I'm even saying that, now let's get to that level of people who say, I have to borrow to eat. So that is the most basic of basic necessities, right? Okay, that's not even the case. Some people would even tell you that they have to borrow for rent. Some people tell you that they have to borrow to pay transport.
Yeah.
Say, look, I want to go hustle. This is Monday morning. I don't have any money on me. I have to borrow. In that particular scenario, there might be excuse borrowing. How does, you know, it seems, how in that kind of scenario, how can we help such a person?
Okay, let me put it this way. For them to get to that point, there were decisions that were made in the past that got them to that point.
Sometimes it might not be their decisions.
Sometimes it might not be their decisions. It could be someone, maybe they were dependent on someone and all that. However, whether we like it or not, there's always a decision that starts with that. Now, I'm not saying that, you know, it's their fault. Okay. So I'm not saying that they take 100% responsibility for that. But the reality is they're in that situation. And something has to be done to curb that situation. When you're talking about rents, in situations like that, I've been in that situation before. But the reality is, I overstretched myself in terms of the accommodation I was looking for.
Okay.
I wanted to live beyond
your means,
what my current pocket could carry. And the reality was, it was a bit of arrogance. So I had to pull back a little bit and say, you know what? Let me cut my coat for now. Eventually, I'll get there. You got to give yourself the time that eventually you'll get there. So that's one of those. Transportation as well. What type of transportation? There's some people that will tell you I can't take bus. It has to be Uber. I have to show up.
That's it. I can still remember.
This gets people in trouble.
It does.
Every Uber ride, money is flowing out of your account and it's not coming back in.
And at times it can be extremely expensive.
Well, yeah.
We've seen people do rides on the average 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. In fact, there was someone who said they spent a ride share and they spent almost 20,000 between, was it Lekki and the airport? 25,000. It was trending. And it also brings, you know, that's the point. Like you said, a lot of this, if you can cut your coat according to your size, and probably even lower than your size.
Exactly, even better. So it gives you that surplus cash.
That cash that you can. And there's also something you said. You might not have been the reason why you are there, but then responsibility falls on you to make decisions that will take you up onto the next place. So you were saying that ensure that you don't have to borrow, live below your means. That's what we're trying to say, right?
That's right, absolutely.
Sharif, it was always great talking to you, as it is always. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. We'll be able to pick something there. I also had to pick something. So now, when I decide not to use the ride-sharing app, I will do it with my full chest. All right. That's it on Motivation and Finance this morning. We'll take this time out now. When we get back, there's quite more on the show. Stay with us.